In the bustling corridors of Anderson and Associates, a prestigious corporate tower that pierced the Seattle skyline, the morning routine unfolded with mechanical precision. The rhythmic sound of a mop against polished marble floors echoed through the halls, as steady and reliable as clockwork. Jason Miller, a 34-year-old single father, moved through his duties with quiet efficiency, invisible to the suited executives who hurried past him with their morning coffee and urgent phone calls. His uniform was crisp, his movements practiced, and his presence seemingly unremarkable. Yet beneath this ordinary exterior lay a secret that would soon shatter every assumption his colleagues had ever made about him. For Jason possessed a skill so unexpected, so perfectly hidden, that when it finally emerged, it would transform not only his own destiny, but challenge the very foundations of workplace hierarchy and human judgment. The corporate world was about to discover that sometimes the most extraordinary abilities hide in the most unexpected places. The Anderson and Associates building stood as a monument to American business success, its 43 floors housing one of the nation's most influential consulting firms. The company specialized in international business relations, particularly with Asian markets, making their headquarters a melting pot of cultures and languages. Japanese clients were among their most valued partners, representing contracts worth millions of dollars annually. The building itself reflected this global reach, with art from various cultures adorning the walls and multiple conference rooms equipped with state-of-the-art translation equipment. Yet for all its international sophistication, the company operated on a rigid hierarchy that rarely acknowledged the potential contributions of its support staff. Jason had been part of this invisible workforce for 3 years, arriving each morning at 5:30 to begin his cleaning rounds before the executives arrived. His story was one of dreams deferred and circumstances beyond his control. A decade earlier, he had been Jason Miller, the promising linguistics student, fluent in Japanese after 4 intensive years of study at the University of Washington. He had earned a prestigious scholarship to study abroad at Waseda University in Tokyo, where he spent 2 transformative years immersing himself in Japanese culture and perfecting his language skills. Those had been the happiest years of his life, filled with discovery, growth, and the promise of a bright future as an international business translator. But life had other plans. His girlfriend Emma became pregnant during his final semester abroad, and Jason made the difficult decision to return to Seattle to support his growing family. He took an entry-level position at a translation firm, working long hours to provide for Emma and their son Timmy. For a while, it seemed his dreams might still be achievable. He continued practicing his Japanese, took evening classes in business administration, and slowly climbed the professional ladder. However, when Timmy was just 2 years old, Emma was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The medical bills were crushing, and Jason exhausted his savings on experimental treatments that ultimately proved futile. Emma passed away when Timmy was 4, leaving Jason devastated and financially ruined. With no family to turn to and mounting debt from medical expenses, Jason was forced to take whatever work he could find. The janitorial position at Anderson and Associates offered decent pay and health insurance for Timmy, benefits that were non-negotiable for a single father. Jason convinced himself it was temporary, that he would eventually return to translation work once he got back on his feet. But as months turned into years, the demands of single parenthood and the comfort of steady employment kept him mopping floors instead of translating contracts. He never spoke of his education or language skills at work, partly from shame and partly from a learned understanding that people see what they expect to see. To his colleagues, he was simply the quiet janitor who did his job well and never caused trouble. Henry Anderson, the company's CEO and founding partner, represented everything the corporate world expected from a leader. At 52, he commanded respect through sheer presence, his silver hair perfectly styled and his custom suits immaculate. He had built Anderson and Associates from a small consulting firm into a multinational powerhouse through ruthless efficiency and an unwavering focus on results. His office on the 43rd floor was a shrine to success, lined with awards and photographs of him shaking hands with world leaders and business magnates. Yet despite his achievements, Henry remained somewhat of an enigma to his employees. He rarely engaged in small talk, never attended company social events, and maintained professional distance even from his senior partners. What his employees did not know was that Henry harbored his own passion for Japanese culture. This interest had begun during his military service in Okinawa 30 years earlier, where he had been stationed for 2 years as a young Marine. The experience had profoundly impacted him, introducing him to concepts of honor, discipline, and aesthetic beauty that would shape his business philosophy for decades to come. He had studied Japanese intermittently over the years, achieving conversational fluency, though he rarely had opportunities to practice. His personal library contained hundreds of books on Japanese history, philosophy, and business practices, and he had visited Japan numerous times on both business and personal trips. Henry's appreciation for Japanese culture extended beyond mere professional necessity. He understood the nuances of Japanese business etiquette, the importance of relationships in their corporate structure, and the subtle art of negotiation that required patience and cultural sensitivity. This knowledge had been instrumental in securing several major contracts with Japanese firms, though he typically relied on professional translators during important meetings to ensure nothing was lost in translation. He believed that even small misunderstandings could derail multi-million-dollar deals, so he preferred to err on the side of caution when it came to language barriers. The other employees at Anderson & Associates represented a typical cross-section of corporate America. There was Margaret Chen, the ambitious senior associate who specialized in market analysis for Asian businesses. She spoke Mandarin fluently but struggled with Japanese, often relying heavily on translation software and professional interpreters. David Rodriguez headed the International Contracts Division and had successfully managed relationships with clients across Europe and South America, but he found the intricacies of Japanese business culture challenging. Sarah Kim, despite her Korean heritage, had grown up entirely in America and spoke no Asian languages, a fact that sometimes frustrated her when working with Asian clients. These talented professionals formed the backbone of the company's international operations, yet none possessed the specific linguistic skills that would prove crucial in the coming crisis. The building's support staff existed in a parallel universe, largely invisible to the executives who depended on their services. Besides Jason, there was Maria Santos, who handled catering for client meetings and knew everyone's coffee preferences by heart. Tom Washington worked security and had been with the company since its early days, watching it grow from a small firm to its current size. Linda Foster managed the reception desk with cheerful efficiency, greeting visitors and managing the complex scheduling demands of the executive team. These employees were appreciated for their reliability, but their potential contributions beyond their assigned roles were never considered. Jason's daily routine began long before the corporate day officially started. He would drop Timmy off at the early morning daycare program at his elementary school, then drive across town to reach Anderson & Associates by 5:30. His first task was always the executive floors, cleaning the offices and conference rooms before the important people arrived. He took pride in his work, ensuring that every surface gleamed and every wastebasket was emptied. The quiet hours before dawn were actually his favorite part of the day, when he could work without interruption and sometimes catch glimpses of the city waking up through the floor-to-ceiling windows. As he cleaned, Jason often found himself overhearing conversations and reading documents left on desks. His linguistic training made him naturally observant of communication patterns, and he had developed an almost encyclopedic knowledge of the company's various projects and client relationships. He knew which deals were struggling, which partnerships were thriving, and which executives were under pressure to deliver results. This information was never something he sought out deliberately, but it was impossible to avoid when spending hours in spaces where important decisions were made and discussed. On this particular Tuesday morning in November, the building buzzed with unusual tension. Anderson & Associates was in the final stages of negotiating a massive infrastructure contract with Yamamoto Construction, one of Japan's largest development firms. The deal, worth over $50 million, would involve consulting services for a series of smart city projects across Southeast Asia. It represented not only a significant financial opportunity, but also a chance to establish Anderson & Associates as a major player in the rapidly growing Asian smart city market. The negotiations had been proceeding smoothly for months, with both sides expressing optimism about reaching an agreement. However, a last-minute complication had arisen regarding environmental compliance standards that threatened to derail the entire project. The Yamamoto representatives were scheduled to participate in a crucial video conference that morning to address these concerns, but their preferred interpreter had fallen ill with food poisoning the night before. The The backup translator they had arranged spoke business Japanese but lacked the technical expertise needed to navigate the complex environmental regulations that had become the sticking point in negotiations. Margaret Chen had been working around the clock to prepare for the meeting, studying environmental compliance requirements and trying to anticipate every possible question or concern the Japanese clients might raise. She had pulled together a comprehensive presentation that addressed each technical issue in detail, but she was acutely aware that her limited Japanese vocabulary might not be sufficient to convey the nuances of environmental law that could make or break the deal. David Rodriguez had offered to assist, but his experience was primarily with European markets, and he worried about making cultural missteps that could offend their Japanese partners. Henry Anderson understood the stakes better than anyone. Yamamoto Construction represented exactly the type of long-term partnership that could elevate his company to the next level of international prominence. The relationship had taken years to develop, built on mutual respect and careful attention to cultural protocols. A failure to communicate effectively during this critical juncture could not only cost them this particular contract, but might also damage their reputation in the broader Japanese business community, where word traveled quickly and trust, once lost, was nearly impossible to rebuild. As 8 o'clock approached, the tension in the office was palpable. The conference room had been prepared with meticulous attention to detail, from the arrangement of the chairs to the placement of water glasses and notepads. The video conferencing equipment had been tested multiple times to ensure perfect audio and visual quality. Margaret had rehearsed her presentation repeatedly, and David had prepared detailed handouts in both English and Japanese, though he worried about potential translation errors in the technical documents. Jason continued his morning routine, cleaning the adjacent hallway and occasionally glancing through the glass walls of the conference room where the frantic preparations were taking place. He could see the stress on everyone's faces and had overheard enough conversations to understand the importance of the upcoming meeting. Part of him wanted to help, but he had learned over the years to keep his head down and avoid drawing attention to himself. His job was to clean, not to involve himself in corporate affairs that were far above his pay grade. At exactly 8:15, the video conference began. Jason was emptying trash cans in the hallway when he heard the familiar sounds of Japanese conversation coming from the conference room speakers. The Yamamoto representatives appeared on the large screen, 5 serious-faced executives in dark suits, seated around a polished conference table in their Tokyo headquarters. Leading the group was Kenji Yamamoto himself, the company's 60-year-old president, whose reputation for perfectionism and attention to detail was legendary in Japanese business circles. The meeting began with the customary exchange of pleasantries and formal greetings, conducted in carefully pronounced English with occasional Japanese phrases. Margaret began her presentation, speaking slowly and clearly while frequently pausing to ensure her words were being properly understood. The makeshift translator, a young woman from a local language service, did her best to convey the technical information, but Jason could immediately tell that she was struggling with the specialized terminology related to environmental compliance and smart city infrastructure. As the discussion progressed, the communication difficulties became increasingly apparent. The translator stumbled over technical terms, occasionally asking for clarification or admitting that she was not familiar with specific regulatory concepts. Jason watched through the glass as Margaret's frustration grew visible, her carefully prepared presentation being undermined by linguistic barriers that prevented her from conveying crucial information with the precision that Japanese business culture demanded. The situation reached a critical point when Yamamoto-san asked a complex question about carbon emission standards for urban development projects in tropical climates. The translator struggled to convey the question accurately, and Margaret's response, filtered through imperfect translation, clearly did not address the specific concerns that had been raised. Jason could see the Japanese executives exchanging glances, their expressions showing polite but unmistakable dissatisfaction with the quality of communication. Henry Anderson, who had been observing from the back of the room, stepped forward to intervene. His presence immediately commanded attention, and he began speaking directly to the camera in his measured, authoritative voice. However, even his diplomatic skills could not overcome the fundamental communication barrier that was preventing both sides from reaching a clear understanding of the technical issues at stake. It was at this moment that Jason made a decision that would change everything. He had been wrestling with himself for the past 20 minutes, watching talented professionals struggle with problems he could easily solve. His natural instinct was to remain invisible, to continue with his cleaning duties and avoid any situation that might complicate his carefully maintained anonymity. But as he watched the mounting frustration in the conference room and listened to the increasingly strained conversation in Japanese, he realized that some situations demanded action regardless of personal consequences. Setting down his cleaning supplies, Jason quietly opened the conference room door and stepped inside. The sudden appearance of the janitor in the middle of a crucial business meeting caused immediate surprise, with several executives turning to look at him with expressions ranging from confusion to annoyance. Henry Anderson's eyebrows rose slightly, but something in Jason's demeanor prevented him from immediately asking the custodian to leave. Jason moved calmly to a position where he could see the video screen clearly, then began speaking in flawless, formal Japanese. His voice was confident and respectful, his pronunciation perfect, and his choice of honorific language exactly appropriate for addressing senior business executives. He began by apologizing for the interruption and explaining that he had overheard the discussion of environmental compliance issues and wondered if he might be able to assist with translation to ensure that all parties fully understood the technical requirements being discussed. The reaction in both locations was immediate and dramatic. In the Seattle conference room, Margaret Chen's mouth fell open in shock, while David Rodriguez looked as though he had seen a ghost. Henry Anderson's usual composure cracked slightly, his eyes widening as he processed what he was witnessing. The young translator looked relieved and embarrassed in equal measure, realizing that her limitations had been exposed by someone who clearly possessed far superior language skills. On the Tokyo side of the video conference, the transformation was even more striking. Yamamoto-san's previously reserved expression brightened noticeably, and he immediately responded in rapid, fluent Japanese, his relief at being able to communicate directly evident in both his voice and body language. The other Japanese executives leaned forward with renewed interest, clearly impressed by Jason's linguistic abilities and his understanding of proper business protocol. What followed was a remarkable display of cross-cultural communication at its finest. Jason served as a bridge between the two groups, translating not just words but concepts, ensuring that technical terms were rendered accurately and that cultural nuances were preserved in both directions. His years of study and his deep appreciation for Japanese culture allowed him to navigate the complex web of formal language, implied meanings, and respectful indirectness that characterized high-level Japanese business communication. The environmental compliance issues that had seemed so intractable just minutes earlier began to resolve themselves as Jason facilitated clear communication between Margaret's technical expertise and Yamamoto-san's specific concerns. He translated complex regulatory concepts with precision, ensuring that both sides understood not just what was required, but why those requirements existed, and how they could be met without compromising the project's timeline or budget. As the meeting progressed, Jason demonstrated not only his linguistic skills, but also his deep understanding of both American and Japanese business cultures. He knew when to use formal honorifics and when more casual language was appropriate. He understood the importance of allowing face-saving pauses when difficult topics were discussed, and he skillfully managed the delicate balance between directness and diplomacy that successful international negotiations required. Henry Anderson watched this transformation with growing amazement. The quiet janitor whom he had barely noticed for 3 years was revealing himself to be exactly the kind of cultural bridge that Anderson and Associates had been seeking to expand their Asian operations. Jason's performance was not just competent but masterful, displaying a level of linguistic and cultural sophistication that many professional translators never achieved. The Japanese executives were equally impressed. Yamamoto-san commented several times on Jason's excellent command of Keigo, the complex system of honorific Japanese used in formal business settings. He praised Jason's understanding of technical terminology and his ability to convey complex concepts with clarity and precision. Most importantly, the Japanese team began to relax and engage more openly in the discussion, their initial skepticism about the environmental compliance issues giving way to collaborative problem-solving. Margaret Chen found herself able to present her technical analysis with unprecedented clarity, knowing that every nuance of her environmental compliance strategy was being accurately conveyed to the Japanese team. David Rodriguez began contributing regulatory insights that he had been hesitant to share earlier, confident that Jason would translate not just his words but his intent. Even the young professional translator began to participate more effectively, learning from Jason's example and gaining confidence as the communication barriers dissolved. The meeting that had begun in tension and confusion transformed into a productive negotiation session. Environmental compliance standards were clarified, implementation timelines were established, and both sides began to see clear paths forward for the smart city projects. The technical obstacles that had threatened to derail the entire deal became manageable challenges with defined solutions. As the 2-hour session drew to a close, Yamamoto-san addressed Jason directly, thanking him in formal Japanese for his invaluable assistance and expressing hope that he would be involved in future communications between the companies. The other Japanese executives echoed these sentiments, clearly indicating that Jason's participation had been crucial to the meeting's success. When the video conference finally ended, the Seattle conference room fell into stunned silence. Jason stood quietly, uncertain about what would happen next, while the other participants processed what they had just witnessed. The assumptions and hierarchies that had defined their workplace relationships for years had been completely overturned in the space of 2 hours. Henry Anderson was the first to speak, his voice reflecting a mixture of amazement and curiosity that was entirely uncharacteristic of his usual corporate demeanor. He asked Jason to remain after the others had left, and the two men found themselves alone in the conference room where everything had changed. The conversation that followed was unlike any exchange Henry had ever had with an employee. He learned about Jason's educational background, his time in Japan, and the circumstances that had led him to his current position. Henry shared his own connection to Japanese culture and his growing recognition that his company had been overlooking tremendous talent within its own walls. Jason spoke honestly about his financial struggles, his responsibilities as a single father, and his reluctance to reveal his language skills out of fear that he would be seen as overqualified for his current position. He had worried that claiming abilities beyond his job description might make him seem presumptuous or dissatisfied with his work, potentially leading to his termination at a time when he could not afford to lose his steady income and health insurance. Henry listened with growing respect for Jason's character and growing awareness of his own company's shortcomings in recognizing and utilizing employee potential. He realized that Anderson and Associates had been operating under assumptions about worth and capability that had prevented them from discovering extraordinary resources within their own organization. The immediate result of this revelation was Jason's promotion to a newly created position as Senior Cultural Liaison for Asian markets. His salary increased dramatically, and his new role would involve not just translation services, but also cultural consulting for major international projects. The position came with an office on the 38th floor, a benefits package that included educational support for Timmy, and the opportunity to finally use his skills and education in a professional capacity. But the changes went far beyond Jason's individual advancement. Henry Anderson began implementing company-wide initiatives to better understand and utilize the diverse talents of all employees, regardless of their current job classifications. Regular skills assessments were instituted, educational opportunities were expanded, and clear pathways were established for employees to contribute in areas beyond their original job descriptions. The Yamamoto construction contract was successfully completed 6 months later, leading to additional projects worth over $200 million. Jason became the primary cultural liaison for all Japanese clients, and his reputation in the international business community grew rapidly. Other companies began seeking his consulting services, and Anderson and Associates found itself at the forefront of cross-cultural business relations in the Pacific Northwest. For Jason personally, the transformation was even more profound. He was able to move Timmy to a better school district, and for the first time in years, he felt that he was using his education and abilities to their fullest potential. The shame and frustration that had accumulated during his years of underemployment gradually gave way to renewed confidence and professional satisfaction. Timmy, now 8 years old, began learning Japanese himself, inspired by his father's success and excited about the possibility of visiting Japan someday. Jason started planning for that trip, knowing that he could finally afford to show his son the country and culture that had shaped so much of his adult life. The story of Jason Miller's transformation became legendary within Anderson and Associates and eventually spread throughout the broader Seattle business community. It served as a powerful reminder that extraordinary abilities often exist in unexpected places, and that rigid assumptions about worth and potential can blind organizations to their own greatest assets. Henry Anderson often reflected on the lessons learned from that November morning. His company had been seeking to expand its international capabilities for years, investing heavily in professional development programs and recruiting efforts, while the solution to their most pressing needs had been quietly mopping floors just outside their conference room. The experience taught him that true leadership involved not just managing known resources, but discovering hidden potential and creating opportunities for people to exceed everyone's expectations, including their own. The broader implications of Jason's story extended far beyond a single company or industry. In a world increasingly divided by assumptions about class, education, and social status, his experience demonstrated that talent and capability exist at every level of society, often waiting for nothing more than recognition and opportunity. The janitor who spoke perfect Japanese became a symbol of untapped potential and the transformative power of seeing people as complete human beings rather than just their job titles. Margaret Chen, who had initially been shocked by Jason's intervention, became one of his strongest advocates and closest collaborators. She learned to appreciate not just his linguistic skills but his analytical abilities and cultural insights, which proved invaluable in developing more effective strategies for international market expansion. Their partnership became a model for how different types of expertise could be combined to achieve results that neither could have accomplished alone. David Rodriguez underwent his own transformation, recognizing that his assumptions about capability had been limiting his team's effectiveness. He began actively seeking out diverse perspectives and hidden talents within his division, leading to several breakthrough innovations in international contract management and cultural adaptation strategies. The young translator who had struggled during that crucial meeting became a regular collaborator with Jason, learning from his expertise while contributing her own insights into contemporary Japanese business trends. Their professional relationship evolved into a mentorship that helped her develop the advanced skills needed for success in high-level international business translation. As months passed, Jason's reputation continued to grow throughout the international business community. He was invited to speak at conferences on cross-cultural communication, consulted on complex international negotiations, and eventually wrote a series of articles on the importance of cultural sensitivity in global business relationships. His unique perspective, combining street-level authenticity with academic expertise and real-world business experience, resonated with audiences who had grown tired of purely theoretical approaches to international business. The financial security that came with his new position allowed Jason to pursue interests and opportunities that had been impossible during his years of economic struggle. He enrolled in evening classes to update his business knowledge, began studying other Asian languages to expand his professional capabilities, and started a small consulting practice that helped other companies navigate the complexities of Japanese business culture. Most importantly, Jason's success created opportunities for Timmy that would have been unimaginable just a year earlier. The boy excelled in his new school, showed a natural aptitude for languages, and began talking about following in his father's footsteps in international business. The cycle of limited expectations and constrained opportunities that had defined Jason's adult life was finally broken, replaced by possibilities that seemed to expand with each passing day. The transformation of Jason Miller from invisible janitor to respected international business professional became more than just a personal success story. It evolved into a case study taught in business schools, a reminder to corporate leaders about the importance of recognizing hidden talent, and an inspiration to workers everywhere who felt trapped by circumstances or overlooked by their employers. Years later, when Henry Anderson was asked about the most important lesson of his business career, he would inevitably return to that November morning when his assumptions about people and potential were permanently shattered by a man with a mop who spoke perfect Japanese. The experience taught him that the most valuable resources in any organization are often the ones that remain hidden until someone takes the time to truly see and appreciate the people who make everything possible. The story continues to resonate because it speaks to fundamental questions about human worth, hidden potential, and the transformative power of opportunity. In a world where people are often defined by their current circumstances rather than their capabilities, Jason Miller's journey from janitor to executive serves as a powerful reminder that extraordinary achievements can emerge from the most ordinary beginnings, and that the next great breakthrough might be quietly mopping floors just outside the boardroom door.